In modern warfare, if you can be seen, you can be hit. And for 7 years, the Islamic Republic of Iran survived by staying invisible. They built a ghost fleet, hundreds of tankers that vanished from global tracking system to move $40 billion of oil a year. But in October 2025, something inexplicable happened. Over the course of 48 hours, the transponders on 80% of Iran's national tanker company fleet turned on. The ghost fleet decloaked. Was it a technical glitch, a cyber attack, or catastrophic miscalculation by Tehran trying to prove legitimacy to the UN? We still don't know why it happened, but we know what happens next. The United States stopped sanctioning the money and started seizing the ships. This week, we witnessed the most aggressive maritime interdiction campaign since the Second World War. The Marinera, the Skipper, the Olina, 3 supertankers seized in international waters. And this isn't just a story about boats, this is a story of how specific legal loophole, a Russian submarine, and a street sign in Tehran are all connected to the potential collapse of a regional superpower. If this is your first time here, this is Watermelon Express. We don't do 24-hour news cycle, we do not do outrage. To unpack all of this, we have to see the full picture. To understand the magnitude of this week, you have to understand the machine that just broke. You see, Iran exports roughly 1.7 million barrels of oil a day. 90% of that goes to China, but it doesn't go directly. It works like a cartel's logistics network. An Iranian tanker leaves Karaj Island, it turns off its AIS, the automatic identification system. It sails to a waiting area off the coast of Malaysia or Singapore, and there, in the middle of the ocean, it meets a smaller vessel. They transfer the oil ship to ship. The oil is blended. It gets relabeled as Malaysian blend or Omani crude. Then it is sold to independent teapot refineries in China, Shandong province. These small refineries don't use the international banking system, they pay in yuan, or they barter goods. This system generated $3.6 billion a month for Tehran. It was the financial lung of the regime. It paid for the missile program, it paid for the Basij security forces, but this system relied on one thing: ambiguity. As long as the ships were hard to track, the US preferred to sanction the buyers rather than seize the ships. And seizing a ship is messy. It's an act of war. But when the fleet becomes visible in October, the ambiguity vanishes. And the hawks in Washington, specifically the maximum pressure advocates like Trump, saw an opening. What the US did this week is legally fascinating and geopolitically dangerous. How do you seize a foreign ship in international waters without declaring war? You use a legal weapon called civil forfeiture. This is how it works. The US Department of Justice files a complaint against the oil itself. They argue that because the oil proceeds from the IRGC, a designated terrorist organization, the cargo is the proceeds of a crime. But here's the trick. To seize the ship, you have to prove it is stateless. Take the Marinera, seized in the North Atlantic. It was formerly known as the Bella 1. When the US Navy approached, it tried to switch its flag from a Guyana to Russian mid-voyage. Under international law, you can't just swap flags like a license plate while you're being chased. The US declared that the vessel is stateless. A stateless ship has no protection, so it's fair game for anyone to board. This is where it gets heavy. Russia didn't just file a complaint. Reports indicate that a Russian submarine was positioning itself to escort these tankers. We were minutes away from a kinetic standoff between the US Navy and the Russian Navy in the Atlantic. China calls this piracy, Russia calls it a violation of maritime sovereignty, and they both have a point. You see, if China started seizing US merchant ships because they carried goods China didn't like, we call it an act of war, but the US is betting that Tehran is too weak to fight back, and Beijing is too pragmatic to start World War III over a few tankers of cheap oil. So the lung is punctured, the money is stopping. What happens to the body? Well, we are seeing the answer in real time in Tehran. We are on the 14th night of protests, but you need to look past the fire to see the data. As I mentioned in my last video, the rial has hit 1.4 million to the dollar. Inflation is at 52%, so this isn't really just about political freedom anymore, it's about total collapse of purchasing power. The merchant class, the bazaars who historically supported the clergy, are joining the strikes. And this economic desperation is breaking the psychological barrier of fear. And you've probably seen this Trump street video. It's easy to meme this, but look at the context. For 47 years, the regime's legitimacy was built on anti-imperialism. When citizens in the capital are openly appealing to the leader of this imperial state for intervention, the ideological immune system of the revolution has failed. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has moved from vague support to specific tactical instructions. Seize the cities, overwhelm the security forces. This creates a nightmare feedback loop for the supreme leader. He needs money to pay the security forces to crush the protests, but the US has seized the ships that bring in that very money. History teaches us that regimes rarely fall solely because of protests. They fall when the security apparatus decides the cost of loyalty is just too high. If the checks to the besieged start to bounce because the Marinera and the skipper Olina never made it to China, that loyalty evaporates. The strategy from Washington is brutal, but it's clear. It's called a binary choice. Force the leadership in Tehran to choose either capitulation, dismantle the nuclear program and the proxy network to get the oil flowing again, or collapse and watch your whole economy zero out until the state disintegrates. And critics are arguing that this is dangerous. A desperate regime is unpredictable. They could close the Strait of Hormuz, they could lash out at Qatar or Saudi Arabia, they could accelerate the nuclear dash. We are backing a nuclear threshold state into a corner with no exit. The Ghost Fleet was Iran's insurance policy against total collapse, the policy that has been cancelled. And the variable to watch now isn't the US Navy, it's the Chinese response. Will Beijing send its own naval escorts to protect its oil supply, or will it just cut Tehran loose? We are in uncharted waters, legally, economically, and militarily speaking. And for the people on the streets of Tehran, the clock is ticking louder than ever. So if you've made it this far, you're not here for the 30-second sound bites or the mainstream noise. You're here for the intelligence. And this is what we do at Watermelon Express. We don't outrage, we don't do guessing. We track the ships, we read the legal filings, and we map the conflicts before they hit the evening news. So thank you for watching. And if you want to see more of why Venezuela ties into all of this, we've put a link in the description down below. Make sure you subscribe to WMX Intel to stay independent and stay ahead of the curve. I'm out.